Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you. Well, we can see now what the GOP has become. It's become the anti-ATF, anti-FBI, anti-law enforcement, pro-insurrection party. Mr. Director, I appreciate your being here. You have one of the toughest jobs in America. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle treat you like you're some kind of a mass shooter instead of someone trying to protect us from the epidemic of gun violence. And I want to recognize all of the volunteers from Moms Demand Action and thank you for being here. Thank you for your advocacy around the nation. I appreciate how much you're devoted to trying to end this scourge of gun violence. I think like many Americans, that after the tragedy of Sandy Hook, it would finally be enough. Watching those beautiful children massacred would be finally enough to prompt this Congress to do something, to stop this insanity. But it didn't. Tragically, so many members of Congress learned a very different lesson, that they could just wait it out. They could wait out tragedy after tragedy after tragedy, and they would have to do nothing. And indeed, on the other side of the aisle, it's just gotten worse. It's just gotten worse. Whenever you see a disparity between what the American people want and what they get, there's usually a powerful special interest at work. And here, the American people desperately want an end to this epidemic. They want common sense gun safety legislation. They want a ban on assault weapons. They want truly universal background checks. It's insane that you can be denied the purchase of a weapon because you're a felon and then go out in the parking lot and buy the same gun. That is insane. And of course, we see the result when we see our children mowed down week after week after week. And it's not like there aren't answers to this. It's not like there aren't things that work. There are things that work, like a ban on assault weapons and a ban on high-capacity clips. And yes, it won't stop every shooting, it won't stop every mass shooting, but it'll stop a lot of them, and it'll make the ones that happen far less lethal. I mean, the GOP has become the party of wanting guns with more lethality, capable of killing more people, capable of killing more kids and more cops. And I'm sure they don't actually want cops and kids to die, but it's the effect of their actions, it's the effect of their inaction that people are dying. I mean, not even NRA members want this. And so why do they? Who benefits from this? Who benefits from this absurd, grotesque spectacle of mass shootings week after week and the daily trauma of people getting gunned down? Who benefits? Certainly not the American people. Well, the gun makers benefit. It's all about the money. Apparently, it's all about the money. Nothing else matters. I've been carrying a bill now for 6 or 8 years to repeal the immunity that the gun industry has. Because if it's all about the money, then the only thing that will stop the violence is to take away the money, take away the profit in murder. So I'm grateful to Moms Demand Action. I'm grateful for what you're doing out there. You're making a difference. If not in this building, you're making a difference in state capitals. I think you're going to make a difference in this building. We will get to a tipping point where we will show that we can beat the NRA, we can pass common sense reforms, and we can protect the public. You know, there has been a lot of progress, I think, on the Democratic side of the aisle of members running towards this issue, not away from it. But on the other side of the aisle, after that terrible shooting in Buffalo, for example, a year or two ago, when one of the Republican members said they could no longer in good conscience oppose an assault weapons ban, it was a few days later they were forced to announce that they would not run again because they were told basically that they would be drummed out of the party. And that has got to change. We're just going to see more Americans die from the lack of courage in this building. But I am just so fed up with getting up every day and seeing another city devastated, another town, another school known not for the beauty of its people, but for the deadliness of another tragedy. We have got to do better than this. I yield back.
I yield back, Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Schiff.
I thank the chairman and move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
23 days, that is apparently how long it takes for my Republican colleagues to move on from the tragedy of the shooting in Nashville, during which 3 9-year-old children and 3 adults were slaughtered in their school. We were supposed to hold this markup the very next day, but Republicans pulled it down at the last moment, likely knowing how callous it would seem if they decided to proceed with the markup as planned, or maybe thinking that we would forget what took place in Nashville, the country would forget, but we haven't forgotten. The parents and loved ones of those victims haven't forgotten. Evelyn Deekhouse and William Kinney and Haley Scruggs were children. We haven't forgotten them. Now, I've heard several arguments by my colleagues about essentially why we should make it easier to kill children, why we should refuse to take any step to make it more difficult to kill children in a mass shooting like we've seen time after time after time. And let me just see if I can articulate some of those arguments. One is, you don't understand guns. You don't understand guns. Well, I'll tell you this. We understand biology. We understand what a high-capacity round does to a child's body. We understand what multiple rounds of an assault weapon projectile can do to tear flesh from the bone. Isn't that enough understanding? What we don't understand is your blind allegiance to the NRA. What we don't understand is why even the majority of NRA members who support assault weapon bans, why you don't support them. It's not even about the members of the NRA, of course. It's, I guess, about their organizational support or who knows what. We don't understand that blind allegiance to the NRA. Another argument we hear from our colleagues on the other side of the aisle is because the law won't stop all gun violence, it's just not worth doing. If we can't save all lives, it's not worth saving a single life. Well, I suppose that logic works until that single life is your own, or maybe it's your child. But why is it so hard to step into the shoes of someone who's lost a loved one from gun violence? Don't you think we would feel differently if that had happened to one of our family? And finally, we hear the argument that nothing really works. No gun safety laws really work. Nothing works. We're powerless. And so we don't have to do anything. But of course, when you look at other countries that have enacted laws, they have made their people more safe. There's a reason why the United States is alone in the world with the magnitude of gun violence. There are, in fact, things we can do that provably make our country more safe and better protect the lives of our children. We just don't have the will. We just don't have the courage. And so we see gun tragedy after gun tragedy after gun tragedy. Our colleagues say these braces were created to help disabled veterans shoot more easily. That may have been the purpose behind the original brace, but those braces now are modified by manufacturers, transforming a pistol into more concealable and deadly assault weapon. They're used to evade even the most porous of background systems, but even that is not enough. I've introduced legislation to strip away the gun industry's immunity from liability, an immunity that no other industry enjoys. That immunity was extended not just to the industry, but to the NRA itself. But that's too much for my colleagues who think that, no, the gun industry alone ought to enjoy the ability to act negligently without repercussion. I am so sick of seeing these constant tragedies, of seeing these grieving parents. I'm so fed up with the lack of courage here. When one of you accepts the necessity of a ban on assault weapons immediately within days, as our former colleague from near Buffalo was forced to resign or forced to say he wouldn't run for re-election because that was the end of his chances. We could do better this. We have to do better this. I'm sick of doing nothing. I'm sick of thoughts and prayers, and the slaughter continues. We are not powerless to do something here. If we had a little courage, we could save lives. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Hunt, is recognized.
Who's right the last word?
Gentleman's recognized.
As a father of 3 young children, I'm deeply wounded by the horrific tragedy that we saw in Nashville. We saw the lives of 6 people taken, 3 young children. The shooting was reported to police at 10:13 a.m., and the suspect was shot by 2 Nashville police officers at 10:27 a.m. This quick response time saved countless lives is a testament to law enforcement, and we thank them every single day. As a congressman, I want to do everything in my power to protect children all around this country from experiencing something like that again. Unlike my colleagues on the left, I'm different, and I think an actual solution to protect our children is not what's being proposed by the left, nor is it political. It is a clear attempt to erode the Second Amendment rights for law-abiding citizens and AR-15 owners like myself. Every time I walk around this Capitol, I feel extremely safe. I've deployed multiple times. I've been on multiple bases. I think to myself, oh my goodness, hot damn. I don't have to really worry about anything because I'm surrounded by people with guns that want to keep me safe. We have barricades, multiple checkpoints, metal detectors. We are staffed by 2 or 4 police officers at all times. All day there was a gentleman standing at this door in case somebody entered this room with a gun. The U.S. Capitol Police is comprised of more than 2,000 officers and over 350 civilian employees who provide operational and administrative support that has an annual budget of approximately $460 million. And for some of my colleagues, that's still not enough because they have their own private security on top of that, surrounded by people that carry guns. And I can assure you that the people here on the Hill are well protected. What about our school children? This is not a round. This is a pen. Now, one of my staffers tried to bring this pen to my office, and he was stopped by a metal detector, and it went through the x-ray machine, and he was almost tackled by our police services right here at the Capitol, doing their jobs, of course. And we proved that, of course, it was a pen. If a pen that looks like this can't get to my office, then how does a homicidal maniac that has weapons walk into a school and arbitrarily murder innocent children? Because we wear this pen, that does not make us more important than our children. There's a private school in Houston, Texas, and I was there a few months ago, and I was giving a young man his appointment to West Point. I drove on the campus, and I was met by 2 armed guards. There were parking places that were just for visitors, and they had even more armed guards beyond that. I felt very secure as I drove onto this school. The headmaster or head of school, she met me in the front, and I said, "My God, ma'am, I feel very secure in this place. What's the secret here?" She said, "Wesley, actually, given my religious beliefs, I hate guns. I don't do guns. But it's my responsibility to keep these young people safe."
This amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment would add the Bipartisan Background Checks Act of 2023, authored by Republican Brian Fitzpatrick, to the underlying bill. This would provide universal background checks. We live in a state, live in a country where you can go into a gun store, you can be a felon, you can have a serious mental health issue that should disqualify you from obtaining a weapon, you can have a domestic violence restraining order against you. and you can seek to purchase a gun, and you can be refused. But you can leave that gun store, you can go outside, you can buy that same weapon off the back of someone's truck. Or you can buy it online. Or you can buy it at a gun fair. It makes no sense to have a situation in this country where you can be refused because you failed a background check when you go to a store, but you can leave the store and buy the same weapon in the parking lot. That makes no sense to anyone, except perhaps the NRA. We don't have to live with the constant scourge of gun violence. We don't have to live every day just a phone call away from getting terrible news that someone in your family has been killed. Like so many families, my wife and I got a call from one of our kids about a shooting not far from campus. He was fine. Thank God he was fine, sheltering in place, but so many others have gotten much worse calls. And they're going to continue to get those calls if we don't do something about this. And the terrible shame about gun violence is it's not like we don't know what works. We know universal background checks work. We know an ban on assault weapons works. We know a ban on extended ammunition clips would work. We just have lacked the political will and courage to get it done. My constituents want universal background checks. This amendment would provide universal background checks. Your constituents, my friends across the aisle, they want the same thing. Americans overwhelmingly want truly universal background checks. Now, I realize the NRA doesn't want it, and so this puts all of us in the position of, are we going to vote for our constituents or are we going to vote for the NRA? Well, I'm voting for my constituents. I'm voting for people in my home state of California who are sick of the constant scourge of gun violence, who are fed up with a Congress unwilling or unable to do anything about it. It makes no sense to have a system where you walk into a store and you're refused a gun because you're a felon and you can go outside and you can buy the same gun off the back of someone's truck. That makes no sense. This amendment gives us a chance to change that. Gives us a chance to do something about this terrible, all-too-American problem of mass gun violence and everyday gun violence. Can we please do something? Protect the lives of our family and our neighbors. Protect the lives of people in their churches and their synagogues. Can we please just do something basic? Something simple, something universal, something that makes sense. I urge support of the amendment, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back.
I withdraw the point of order.
Gentleman withdraws a point of order. Who seeks recognition? Gentlelady from Wyoming.
Move to strike the last word.
The gentlelady is recognized.
And I think that we've already covered the purpose of this bill and why it is needed, and the fact that we're talking about law-abiding citizens who both those in the military as well as those in non-traditional living arrangements. It's called the Travelers Gun Rights Act of 2024. We need to focus on what the purpose of the bill is. Anytime that a Democrat starts talking about universal background checks, you know that it's just another effort at gun grabbing and preventing people from being able to exercise their Second Amendment rights. I think that the bill is very clear. This is just another effort to prevent us again from being able to, a certain segment of our population, a certain segment of our law-abiding population from being able to exercise their rights. There are already laws in place for people who are straw purchasers or who are failing to follow the current gun laws. And instead of creating more laws, we should simply enforce the existing ones that are on the books and actually hold criminals accountable. With that, I urge rejection of this amendment and a yes vote on the underlying bill. Thank you. And I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. For gentleman from New York. For New York, what purpose does he seek to be recognized?
Strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this amendment. It is a terrible exception that you can buy a gun from anyone who's not a licensed dealer with no background check. Anybody can get the gun. Any bank robber, any serial murderer can walk in and ask for a gun, no questions asked. That makes no sense at all. From a private seller, that's what I said. From a private seller, not a licensed gun dealer. That makes no sense at all. This country has more gun deaths, I think 45 times as much per capita as any European country, because of loopholes like this, because of obeisance to the NRA. This is a modest amendment. All it does is say you have to have a background check, the same background check you'd have if you bought a gun from a licensed gun dealer, if you buy a gun from an unlicensed gun dealer. Why could anybody object to that? I urge adoption of the amendment, and I yield to Mr. Schiff.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I do want to respond to my Republican colleagues' comments. First of all, when you say any time a Democrat offers a universal background check amendment just because they want to take away people's guns, this is actually language written by a Republican from Pennsylvania. But even if it weren't written by a Republican, what about the rights of a middle school kid or an elementary school kid to go to school and not be gunned down with an assault weapon? What about their rights? What about the rights of worshipers in their place of faith not to be gunned down because someone could evade a background check by buying it at a gun show or buying it off the back of someone's truck? What about their right to life, to liberty, to the pursuit of happiness? Does that get no weight at all? And all we are asking is that people go through a background check before they acquire a record. Is that too much to ask for that child's life in grade school? Or that worshiper's life in church, or a moviegoer's life in the movie theater? Is it too much to ask that we make sure that people aren't circumventing the law by making background checks truly universal and not just a fractured system in which there are an infinite ways to avoid any kind of scrutiny? I don't think it's too much to ask, and I think we need to consider the rights of every American, including gun-owning Americans, not to be gunned down in their everyday lives because someone evaded a background check by buying the gun at a gun show or buying it online. It doesn't seem too much to ask to take this simple step if it's going to save so many American lives. I yield back.
And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Who else seeks recognition? Gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. I rise in full support of this very